Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf Samach Gimel. I want to first take the opportunity to thank everyone who joined the Circle of Friends or gave a donation otherwise to Hadran. Very much appreciated. Anyone who did not yet take care of it, you're still welcome to take care of it. It might be 2024, but that's good. This is Circle of Friends for 2024. So I invite anyone who didn't take care of it yet and would like to. Again, all our services are free of charge. There's no need to donate, but if you can, to help us to, basically this is what helps support all of our programs, both the daily shiurim, the weekly shiurim, and anything else that goes on in Hadran. So helping to spread the love of learning Gemara to women all around, making women understand that learning Gemara is open to everybody. And we would love it if you can help out with that. Today's daf is sponsored by Lawrence and Michelle Berkowitz in loving memory of Dr. Jesse Berkowitz on his shloshim, a man of extreme passion for Medina Israel who brought his whole family on Aliyah. Thanks to Hashem for saving Yair Berkowitz and for granting him strength for his heroic efforts during the Golani battle of December 12th in Gaza, and for continuing to give protection to Amitai, Yair, and Ayelet. And in honor of the engagement of our daughter Ariella to Amitai Abu Zaglo. Today's daf is sponsored by Hadran Women of Long Island in honor of the birth of Hallel Rus, granddaughter of our friend and co-learner Suri Davis Stern. May the entire family see much nachat as Hallel grows in a world of peace and learning. Tizku l'gadla l'torah l'chuppah u'lema'asim tovim. Okay, we are going to get started with a review of what we did at the very end of yesterday's daf. We have a pretty clear structure today, a lot of drashot. What we wanted to figure out right away was why in the Mishnah, when it says that there's double payment, the double payment is for anyone who steals, right? The fact that you have to pay kefil. When you steal something, you have to pay kefil for anything that's alive and metaltele, movable property. So then we wanted to know, where do we get it from? And we went to this pasuk. Okay, I want to actually read the pasukim before we start, because this will provide good background for today's shiur. So we have these pasukim. I want to start with Shmot Perek Kaf Bet, which we're not going to deal with, the beginning of the chapter. Pasukim Aleph Ad Gimel. Okay, we're going to learn the first three pasukim in Perek Kaf Bet. Then we're going to go to pasukim 6, 7, and 8, Vav Zayin Chet. We're skipping the two in between because that actually, it's a whole question. And when you get to Parshat Mishpatim and Parshat Shavu and you want to learn, you could ask the question why Eish is in between these two sections. Okay, fire and everything we've been learning about is smack in the middle of these two sections. But that's not for our topic today. Shmot Perek Kaf Bet talks about im b'machteri imatzei aganav, if you find a thief, and im zarcha shalav, we're going to get, that's a whole set of what that means exactly. But then it says, im himatzei timatzei biyado gneva pasuk gimel. So you're talking about regular theft here. Somebody goes into someone else's house, steals an item. If we find the stolen item in his hands, mishor ad chamor ad seh chayim, if the animal's still alive, a chamor seh, shnayim yishalem. You pay double the amount. You have to pay not only the shore, you also have to pay equal value to the shore, another payment. This we call the knas. We said it's a penalty. The rabbis, that the court institutes. Okay, it's obviously from the Torah. It's not a rabbinic law, but it's in the category of knas, which means if you admit it in court and there aren't witnesses about it, then you don't have to pay it. And you can see that from imi matzei timatzei biyado gneva, right? Not that you told us yourself, but also it's learned out from modeh b'knas patul. If you admit and it's a penalty, then you actually don't pay, but you obviously pay the value of the animal, the first value. That seems to be the basic law of Pishnayim. But our Gemara today is not going to assume that, okay? Our Gemara is going to try to find a different source for Pishnayim, and it's a little bit strange. Why? Seems to be, the reason is because it says in this pasuk, Mishor ad chamor ad seh, which sounds like only animals. Doesn't sound like this includes anything else, okay? Then we get to pasuk Vav. Pasuk Vav describes a different scenario. Not that a thief went into your house, but you gave, let's say you gave me kesef o kelim l'shmor. Okay, kitin ishal re'eu kesef o kelim l'shmor. You gave me something to watch of yours. Vigunav mi beit ha'ish, and it gets stolen from my house. Now, this also seems to be talking about a regular theft. And here, by the way, notice it says kesef o kelim. It doesn't say animals. And it's stolen from my house. Imi matzeh ganav yishalem shnayim. If the ganav is found, you pay 2. The simple reading of this pasuk is that it's talking about theft, but theft not from the owner's house, but from the house of one who's watching, which really shouldn't make any bit of a difference, which is why this pasuk becomes a puzzling pasuk, because didn't we just say the same thing in pasuk Vav? It's a little bit strange. Then it says, so we now have another pasuk, a second pasuk, that talks about kefil, yishalem shnayim. Now it says, im lo yimatzeh ganav. What if, right, I say it was stolen from a house, we don't find a thief. Now, if we don't find a thief, Nikrav Balabayit El Elohim Lo Shalach Yado Melech Reu. I go to the court. Elohim is court, and often in the Torah, even though it also means God, but in this case it means court. And Im Lo Shalach Yado Melech Reu, it's missing the key word, which is I take an oath. Okay, we're going to see how we get that I take an oath from here. That we'll get to later. But I take an oath that I didn't do anything wrong, meaning I didn't steal it. But the next pasuk starts to say, Al kol dvar pesha al shor al chamor al sel sama al kol avedar asher yumar ki uzeh ad Elohim yavod dvar shnehem asher yishun Elohim shalem shnayim l'reu. Very hard pasuk to understand. But what it basically seems to be saying is, if I was doing a dvar pesha though, if I was lying, and whether I was lying about a shor, chamor, a seh, 3 different types of animals, or a sama, or clothing, or al kol avedar, or even if it was a lost item that I was watching for you because I found it on the street, now I need to return it to you, but till I return it, I become a shomer on this item. If I was lying and I really stole it myself, this is what we call to'en ta'anat ganav. Then yishalem shnayim l'reu. Now there's another kefal payment, which is if I claim it was stolen, I didn't actually steal it from your house. You gave it to me to watch, but then I kept it. That's also theft, and I also pay double for that. So we have 3 psukim that talk about kefal. One about a regular thief, another one which seems to be about a regular thief, and then a third one, which is about a to'en ta'anat ganav. Now, we're going to see at the end of today's daf that some people think that pasuk vav already, when it talks about the kefil, is talking already about to'en ta'anat ganav. Okay, that if I claimed it was stolen and it turns out I stole it, I have to pay 2, double. And then you have to say, well, then why are there 2 psukim that say double payment? Why does vav say it and why does chet say it? So we're going to have a lot of lack of clarity here. We're going to have to see that there's different approaches to how to understand these psukim. So what I wanted to point out at the start, that's really an intro to everything we're going to see today. But what I wanted to point out is the start, which pasuk are we learning all the laws of kefal from? It's actually from the to'en ta'anat ganav case, okay? It's not about the regular theft case. And from here, we're learning that kefal applies because it says, al shor, al chamor, al sel, sama. From there, we got to all these details. It applies to animals. It applies to movable property. It doesn't apply, we have the whole list, not to land, not to slaves, not to documents that don't have inherent value, and not to hekdesh because it said re'eu in the pasuk. Okay, that's all that. Then we ask this question at the bottom, but wait a minute. And now we're going to have a very, very parallel sugya to what we saw about, if you remember, when we had the whole discussion, when it says shor and chamor in the Torah, what does it mean? And we saw it in a whole bunch of different cases. We had that Mishnah that said the shor and chamor, that are mentioned in all these places, and really means all animals. And then we said, what about, how does it get to birds from there? And we talked about the psukim by Shabbat. So we're going to have something very similar to what it says there. So now again, the Gemara is going to say, it's true it says salma. So you'd say, okay, well, besides shor, chamor, and seh, we include salma, which is clothing, some sort of garment. From there, you can assume it includes birds as well. This is what we saw at the end of yesterday's daf, to which they said no. Our question is really because salma includes garments and other movable items. But if you're in the animal world, the shor, chamor, and seh seems to specifically be excluding birds, because why wouldn't have given an example of a bird, someone from the chicken bird family? So that's what they're their question. Okay, that's at the very end. Oh, I mute everyone, sorry. Do that. So now it says here, the very end of yesterday's daf, but we're talking about Baalei Chayim, and they want to know why birds are included here. It sounds like birds shouldn't be included. Ema b'Baalei Chayim, right? You would say, let's take, what's the common denominator between shor, chamor, and seh? They're all davar shenivlato matameh b'maga u'masa. They're things that if they die, their nevela, their dead body, is mitame by someone who touches it, someone who carries it. But davar she'ein nivlato matameh b'maga u'masa lo. But a bird is not mitame b'maga u'masa. What do we learn about a bird? First of all, only kosher birds, their dead carcasses, or a dead bird will be mitameh. And it won't be mitameh b'maga u'masa. It's only mitameh, what's called b'beit habliya. When it's in my mouth, it makes me impure while it's in my mouth, if I'm eating it, let's say. And while I'm in my clothes, anything on me becomes impure. But that's a unique kind of tumah. It's not maga u'masa, and it's only for kosher birds. So now they say, so why basically aren't we saying it's only those kind? To which the Gemara says, Avalafot lo. Because theoretically, you could say each one is its own klal u'prat u'klal. What do we say klal u'prat u'klal? It's only things similar. So it should be similar to a shor, similar to a chamor, similar to a seh, in the sense that their nevel is matami mago masa, and that excludes the birds. So, which the Gemara tries to answer, kind of rejecting the question, giving a response. The Gemara could have just written one. The fact that it does more than one seems to be including more things. To which the Gemara says it couldn't have just written one, and we're going to show you why not. And then each one is necessary for some reason, in which case you could still say it's only animals and not birds. Hey, nichtov rachmana, which one could they have written? And now we're going to go through exactly what we saw about a few, whenever, I can't remember now what daf it was, but a bunch of dapim ago. Maybe it was Nun Daled. If you just had shore, you would have said, what makes a shore unique? That it is used as a sacrifice on the altar. So maybe only animals that are used as a sacrifice on the altar would have this double payment. And that's why you needed chamor. Well, if you had shore and then you added chamor, you would have said, so that includes animals that don't go on the altar, right? And non-kosher animals. Havamina, kadosh b'bechora in, she'en kadosh b'bechora lo. But then you would have said maybe only in that category, animals who are, the firstborn is sanctified. What about horses, let's say? So if I steal a horse, I won't be liable. Can't go on the altar. The firstborn is not sanctified in any way. So ambre, they say no, because in king, shor v'chamo, selam ali. But still we have an extra word. Again, as soon as we have an extra word, that will prove that it includes the bird. So we basically say it's true, shor and chamor were necessary, each for their own reason. But se at that point is unnecessary. To which they say, shma mina la tuye ofot. So the se word must include ofot. So it's not the fact that animals are mentioned here, it's the fact that shor and chamor are needed. But se is a totally unnecessary word, which means we can learn from se to all animals and birds. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? Ve'ema, if you're going to say, we learn from se to birds, let's go back to what the logic of a klal u'prat u'klal is. How does a klal u'prat u'klal work? Remember, it started general, al kol dvar pesha, then it got to specifics, and then it said al kol avedah, which included all avedot, which again is an inclusive term. So we only learn things that are similar to the prat. Well, if the prat of se is going to include birds, which kind of birds do you think it'll include? A se is a kosher animal. So maybe it only includes kosher birds, and not just because they're kosher, but because of what we talked about, the impurity here thing. For some reason, they keep going back to the laws of impurity. Maybe it's only kosher birds because they're more similar to a se. Because the carcass of a dead bird carries impurity just like the carcass of a se does. Okay, but only a kosher bird, not a non-kosher bird. Avalofot me'in, non-kosher birds, delepahu tuma, that don't have tuma, delomatame begadim abeit habliya, they aren't matame begadim, your clothes while you're eating it. Lo, maybe they're not included. So if I steal, you have a pet bird that's not a kosher bird, and I steal it, maybe I don't have to pay the kefil. Well, based on this, they reject everything we've said. We thought klal u'prat u'klal, again, klal u'prat u'klal comes to include all animals, including birds and all, movable property. That's not all the ones we reject, we kind of took out. But if you really use a klal u'prat u'klal, and it really wanted to include birds, it should have brought a bird here. And because it didn't bring a bird, and we learned from se, we can only have it learn things that are similar to the se. And the se is a kosher animal that it's the nevela carries impurity. We can therefore only learn from their kosher bird whose nevela carries impurity. And it wouldn't teach us about non-kosher birds. And we know kosher birds are included, so this can't be it. So basically, we reject this whole line of thinking, everything from where we started, Minan and Mila yesterday, and we start fresh. And now we're going to do something similar. This is exactly what happened with Shabbat. We also tried to do it from a klal u'prat. In the end, we said we couldn't. And then we say in the end, kol ribuyahu. The word kol, al kol dvar pesha, the word kol, just like there in Shabbat, we have the chol behem ticha. This is about your animal not being able to work on Shabbat. That word means we're going to go inclusive, not a klalu prat, which is a more exclusive. It's only things similar to the prat. We're going to go with the riboy. Some people even say it's like the riboy miut track. If you remember, sometimes we say klalu prat and sometimes we say riboy miut. Riboy miut includes more, but some people say no, just the word kol is lirabot. It's saying everything. And then there is no klalu prat to klal. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. And it's the exact same question we asked him in the issue of Shabbat, on Daf Nun Dalet. V'hagabe ma'asir dichtiv kol. By ma'asir sheni, it also says kol. V'kadarshina le b'klalu prat. If you want to say whenever it says kol, it basically overrides the klalu prat or drasha and says, oh, forget the klalu prat drasha. The word kol includes everything. Well, in ma'asir sheni, the word kol appeared and they used the klalu prat to klal, and it was exclusive. It was saying only things that are like the pratim. Titanya, as it says in a braitot. V'natata kesef b'chol asher taven nafshecha klal. Remember, Maser Sheni, I take my fruits, I redeem them on a coin if I don't want to schlep them to Jerusalem, and then I take the coin and I buy things with it in Jerusalem. It says you can buy anything you want, but then it starts to tell you what you can buy. Babakal ubatzon, right? Cattle and livestock. Yayin shechal, wine and beer. That's a prat. Ubachol asher tishacham nafshecha, and then it says, and anything your heart, you want, anything you desire. Hazar v'kalal. So there it again includes. Well, the only things you can buy are things that are similar to the details. So it has to be something that derives from something else and grows from the ground, or we said nourishes, gets its nourishment from the ground, like the animals who eat from the ground. This, by the way, would exclude, okay, it also excludes, right, water, we talked about last time, salt, and mushrooms and truffles, things that grow from the ground but don't really grow from the ground, right? They're not considered, they get their sustenance from the ground. We make a shahakol on them, for example. Also fish, by the way, don't get their sustenance from the ground, would also be considered not in this category. Okay, there might be other exceptions. Anyway, we'll put that aside. Here you see, we don't say kol ribuye. So last time we have one answer to this question, which we're going to say right now, but this time we're going to have two possible suggestions. So the first answer is, Amre bikol klala, kol riboya. There's a difference between kol and bichol. In the pasuk by Maser Sheni, it said bichol. Bichol means is a limiting kol. It's not an entire klal. It's a klal pratu klal. But kol overrides the klal pratu klal and says we're going to include everything. And then we make this distinction between kol and bichol. And in the Maser Sheni pasuk, it only used the word bichol. And in our pasuk, it uses the word kol. So that's one answer. Ibait ema, second answer, kol klalahu. We really can say that kol in general is a klala. We're not going to make this distinction between kol and bichol, and therefore the Maser Sheni we use with the klalu pratu klal. But this kol is an exception to the rule for an interesting reason, or I don't know, interesting, but for a reason. Mihu kol dehacha ribuya. Why? Now you might not have noticed this, but let's look at the psukim again. I'll pull them up. In the psukim here, the first pasuk is pasuk vav. Ki yitain ish eyu kesef okelim l'shmor v'gunav mi beit ha'ish. If someone gives his friend money or vessels to watch, and then it's stolen. And then pasuk chet says, al kol dvar pesha al shor chamor al sal sama al kol avedah. Now, theoretically, this is really discussing, it's a continuum, right? We're talking about a situation where someone gives his friend kesef okelim l'shmor, and whether the first pasuk is talking about a ganav or to'en tanah ganav, it doesn't really matter. It's still the beginning of our whole section, which is describing, right? The first could be either describing and then someone actually steals it, or it could be describing and the person claims it was stolen. But either which way, it's setting up the premise for pasuk zayin and chet, which is if it wasn't stolen, right? But I just claimed it was stolen. And then it again goes into this al shor chamor al sal sama. Now we already say kesef ukelim. And in fact, if you look at pasuk vav carefully, there's also a klalu pratu klal there. So comes the Gemara and they say, okay, if a friend gives you something, which would include kind of anything, and then it says, well, it's not just anything, it's kesef okelim, money or vessels, that's a prat. Lishmor, to watch, which sounds like anything they gave you to watch, hadar v'kalal. So there's already a klalu pratu klal in the introductory sentence. The isakadata hayal kol dvar peshet nami the klalu pratu data. So if you think that pasuk chet, by giving you a klalu pratu klal, is also coming to say there's a klalu pratu klal here, it doesn't make any sense. Niktav Rahmana lahane prate gabeha klalu prat. Al kol dvar pesha lamali shmamina ribuyahu. They're basically saying that it should have listed shor chamor ses salma already in pasuk vav when it introduced the topic. The fact that it doesn't mention it there means it doesn't want to use these words for klalu pratu klal, because if it did, it would have mentioned them already from the beginning. Therefore, the words al kol dvar pesha, even though kol generally is used as a klal in a klalu pratu klal structure, or perhaps it could be a klalu prat structure, either which way. In our case, kol is an exception because this pasuk comes after there was already details mentioned, and it didn't mention our details in the pasuk there, so therefore it must be we're not darshaning pasuk chet in a klalu pratu klal manner. But in other cases, like Maser Sheni, sure, you can use kol in a klalu pratu klal drasha. So that's their answer. We have two answers to how the word kol in this case is different from Maser Sheni, either because kol bichol, and there's two different uses of the word, and therefore we're going to treat them in different ways. Kol is going to include everything. Bikol is going to be part of a klalu prat, which is always more inclusive, always more exclusive. It's basically saying only certain things are included, not everything, whereas kol is going to be entirely inclusive. And second answer is this use of kol is unique because it already had a klalu prat to klal before, and it didn't mention all these detailed se, salma, all the shor chamor, and therefore it must not have wanted to use a klalu prat to klal on them. Okay, that's our two answers. Now, before we finish up this topic, we have a few more things to just figure out. So again, we started with a question. Okay, what was our question? How do we know that kefel is in all animals, including birds? We tried to have an answer from a klalu prat to klal. It didn't work because it would only be things that are like the se, after we narrowed it down to the fact that we would learn it from the word se, because shor and chamor are needed for other things, and salma obviously isn't talking about animals or birds or anything like that. So we finally get to kol is the ribuye. We reject the whole klalu pratu klal. And then our question, what about Maser Sheni? We resolve in two ways. Now the Gemara says, well, then if you're saying it's kol is the ribuye, then why did the pasuk say shor, chamor, se, salma? What are those words coming for? And al kol aveda. So we're now going to darshan all those. So now the Gemara says, hashda da'amart kol ribuya. Now that you said kol is an inclusive term, kol hane prate lamali. What do we need all those details for? So chad miute karka, chad miute avadim, chad miute shtarot. Okay, this already we saw from yesterday's daf. Now we know how we get there. One of them, let's just assume, shor is to exclude land. Chamor is to exclude avadim, slaves, Canaanite slaves. If you steal them, there's no kefel. The third one, se, is to exclude shtarot, documents that, again, have no inherent value because the paper isn't valued at what the content of what it says in the paper is valued at. And salma is a new thing we didn't see yet. Something that's not particular, specific. Okay, what does this mean? Rashi has a unique interpretation, which Tosfot says, what are you talking about? Rashi says, davar she'eino mesuyam, this comes from Bava Metzia, is something that doesn't have simanim. Like if you're supposed to return an item, but it doesn't have specific, identifying marks on it. But what does that have to do with anything here? Why would you not have to pay kefel on something that doesn't have identifying marks? So Tosfot says, what is that? That's only important about returning lost items. That has nothing to do with stealing items from people. So Tosfot suggests a few suggestions. I'll mention two of them. Suggest, number one, it could be something that can't be weighed or measured. So then there's no way to really pay kefel if it can't be weighed or measured. Second could be if you stole something that's like half a pomegranate, he suggests, or half a walnut. That it's not misuyam, it doesn't have inherent value in and of itself, so you're not going to pay kefel on it. You're going to have to return it, but you don't have to pay kefel on it because it's almost like it doesn't have significance in and of itself. So it has to have some sort of significance in order to require the kefel payment. So that's what those come for. What about the word al kol aveda? That comes to teach you Lichei de Rabbi Chiur bar Abba, which is we saw him yesterday, if you remember. To Amar Rabbi Chiur bar Abba, this exact statement. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, turning now to Amud Bet. Hato'en te'anat ganav be'aveda meshalem tashlumei kefel. Shenemar al kol aveda asher yomar. And this is how I explain the pasuk. This really seems to be the simple reading. It's not even a drasha. That if there's an aveda, if I found a lost item and I now have it in my house before I return it to you, remember we learned I have to take care of it, I have to watch it. So also on that, I'll have to pay kefil if I lie and I say it was stolen from me, I don't have it anymore, and I steal it for myself, then I obviously have to pay the kefil payment. Okay? In other words, it's not obvious. You might think kefil is only when you give it to me to watch. In this case, I picked it up off the street. But if I lie and steal it for myself, then I'm going to have to pay kefil. Okay, we're going to learn in a minute. It's only after I take an oath, but we'll get to that right now. So now, okay, I'm going to set this up so you don't get confused. The issue of getting lost appears in two different contexts in our sugya. One is I pick up a lost item off the street and I'm watching it and I become a shomer, and that's what we just said. It has the exact same laws for the purposes of kefil. Okay, he even says Arba Chamisha also. Well, we're going to get to that later. But there's another thing, which is until now, we've been talking all about I claim it was stolen from me. Now we're going to talk about what if I claim it was lost and I didn't claim it was stolen. In both cases, I keep it for myself. But one time I claim it was stolen from me, and one time I claim it was lost. Now, why do these two go together? Because a shomer chinam, which is basically the shomer that we're talking about, this is what the psukim are referring to. It's someone who's watching an item without getting paid. Or like we said, watching a lost item, he's certainly not getting paid for that. I found your lost item on the street. I picked it up. I brought it to my house. Nobody's paying me for watching that. That type of shomer, that type of person who's safeguarding someone's object, is exempt from geneva or aveda. If I say it was lost or stolen, and I take an oath in court that it was lost or stolen from me, and let's say I'm telling the truth, okay, in a typical case where it gets lost or stolen from my house, I'm not liable. As long as I take an oath in court, then I don't have to pay you. So now we're going to talk about what we're talking about all along was I claim it was stolen from me, and I try to get out of paying you back, but really I'm taking it for myself. So we're now going to learn two things in this next section. One of them is that there's a distinction between someone who claims it was lost from their house and someone who claims it was stolen. In both cases, I steal it. In both cases, I keep it for myself. But it's considered different, and this is basically going to be darshaned out from the text, if I claim it was lost and take an oath that it was lost, or if I claim it was stolen. And the difference is going to be that there's only kefil if I claim it was stolen, not if I claim it was lost, even though I stole it. Why that is a good question. I don't have a really good answer to that, but that's what we're going to now quote a Mishnah further on in our Masechet, Daf Kufchet, that basically makes this distinction. Tanan Hatan, and adds one important point. So at the end of this whole Mishnah that we're going to quote, the Gemara tells us these are the 2 points I wanted you to the takeaway from this Mishnah. Hecham pikdoni. So you give me an item to watch, and you come back a month later, and you say, where is it, Michelle? Amar lo, avad, and I claim it was lost. Now, I already told you, there's not going to be kefil here if I lied, okay? And I really stole it for myself. So you say, mashbiachani. You say, you better take an oath. If you want to not pay me back the item that I gave you, let's just say it was a watch, and I don't want to pay it back. You say, well, are you taking an oath that it was lost from you? And Amar, amen, and I say, amen. Basically, I agree to the oath. But come the edim, and they say, I ate it. Okay, if it was a watch, I couldn't eat it, but I ate it basically means here, I took it for myself. Okay, and there's witnesses that prove it. Mishalem keren. All I have to do is replace the value of what I stole. Okay, either if it's a watch and I have it still, I have to return it. If it was food, then I ate it, then I don't have to. Okay, then I don't have to pay the food because I don't have it. I have to pay you the value, but I don't pay kefil. That's the whole thing we're saying here. Hoda al piatzmo. But there's something called an asham gzelot. What is an asham gzelot? This is a case where I lie that I didn't steal something, and it turns out I did. And then I feel bad about it. And I come to the court and I say, listen, I want to confess. I really lied. Then mishalem keren v'chomesh v'asham. The chomesh is an extra fifth, which is really a quarter. We'll talk about this later. But you have to pay chomesh and bring a korban asham. What's the purpose of it? The purpose is atonement. Atonement only comes when I want to atone. In the first case, the edim came and proved that I lied. I don't get to get atonement in that case because I didn't want the atonement. In this case, I wanted the atonement, and therefore the asham comes in, called an asham gzelot, comes in when I come to court and I confess. So if I confess, then I bring a korban asham and I pay an extra fifth besides the value of the item. So in a to'en ta'anat avad, number one, there's no there's no kefel payment if I claim it was lost and I really stole it. And if I admit it, then I pay the keren, the chomesh, and the asham. Hecham piktoni, case number 2. And now we're going to compare it to to'en ta'anat ganav, which is the case we've been talking about. You say, where is it? Amar lo nignav, I say I stole it was stolen. Mashbiachani, you say you're willing to take an oath. V'amar amen, and I say yes, I take an oath. Va'edim yidino tosha ganavo, and then witnesses come and prove that I stole it. Mishalem tashlum kefel. This is the classic case of to'en ta'anat ganav that the Torah says you pay kefel. Hodam atzmo, we're going to see later where they get it from, that it excludes avad, okay? That kefel is not by avad. We're going to see that in drashot later. Hodam atzmo, like I said, I don't know where it comes from. What I meant is I don't understand exactly the concept behind it, because in the end I stole it, but we will see where they get it from the words in the pasuk. Hodam atzmo, if I come forth and I admit that I stole it, mishalem keren v'chomesh v'asham. Well, modeh b'knas patur, there's no kefel, because I admitted, and it's only a knas, it's a penalty. So we don't pay penalties when we come and confess. However, you do have the asham, that's classic asham gzelot. I stole something and I have to pay the 5th and the asham. So now the Gemara tells us what we wanted to learn from here. I told you we're going to say 2 important things, and then we're going to find out, and that's going to take us really through the rest of the daf. Where do we learn this from? That's the basic difference, and I chart out on the sheet, you can see. That's the basic difference between to'en tanat avad and to'en tanat ganav. Okay, that's that there is no kefel if I claim it was stolen. Va'afilu to'en tanat ganav. But the other thing they want you to notice, which I wasn't really focusing on, I wanted to wait till we saw it here. The other thing that makes it very clear in this Mishnah is that b'shvua hu demishalem tashlum kefel. It's very clear here that it's only if I took an oath that I now have to pay the kefel payment if it turns out witnesses came and said I lied. But if you claimed, you said, where's my item? And I say, it was stolen from me and I lie, but I don't take an oath and I don't pay you the money yet, and then witnesses come and say, you stole, it's really in your hands, Michelle. Well, I don't pay kefel there. Why? So good question, but it seems like the shvua is real. There's no act of theft here. You gave it to me and it's in my house. So what's the difference if it's in my house and I claim it's mine, or it's in my house and I didn't claim it's mine, right? The only difference is when I exempt myself from payment. I only exempt myself from payment if I take an oath. If I don't take an oath, I still have to pay you. I could claim it was stolen, but if I'm not willing to take an oath about it, I actually have to pay you the money. So only once I did something to exempt myself from the payment, that's when I incur upon myself paying the kefel in the event that witnesses come. So 2 points. One is there's a difference between claiming it was stolen and claiming it was lost. There's no kefel if I claimed it was lost. 2, that only if I take an oath does this kefel kick in. So now they want to know menahane milei. And to do this, we're going to bring 2 braitot. Both braitot disagree about something very, very basic, but they both agree about something, and that's going to be about the shvua, and that's going to be what we're going to prove from these braitot. But then we're going to have to figure out how did these, and that's why I started with those 3 psukim, how did they read these 3 psukim, and particularly pasuk vav? Okay, that first pasuk in the section, which we'll go over very soon. So ditanu Rabbanan. Okay, let's open the psukim in front of us. Okay, I'm going out to the second. I brought the psukim also here because it's important when we're here to be able to see them. Ki pasuk vav. If someone gives your friend kesef or kelim lishmor to watch, and it's stolen from his house, imi matzeh ganav yishalem shnayim. Okay, if we find the ganav, yishalem shnayim. So menani milei ditanu Rabbanan. First braitot, imi matzeh ganav in pasuk vav, they have to pay kefel. Who's that talking about? Not about a regular thief, according to braitot number 1. Bito'en ta'anat ganav katuv medabel. If we find out that I stole it, I have to pay kefel, okay, which is going to be a bit of a problem because then that pasuk is saying the exact same thing the pasuk chet is saying. So it's a little bit strange. But right now they're going to say, obviously, this is talking about in a case where there wasn't a real ganav, it was I stole it for myself. So the Gemara, the braitot asks, and there's a classic structure of a braitot. Okay, you just said this, but how do we know? Maybe it's not. You say this is to'en tanat ganav pasuk vav. Oh, eino ela b'ganav atzmo. Maybe it's just talking about a regular thief, some thief who stole it from my house while I was safeguarding it. Well, kishuhu omer im lo yimatzeh ganav b'to'en tanat ganav katuv medaber. They say you can't view these psukim as not the same thing. This is obviously all one and the same because it says if the ganav is found and if the ganav is not found. which basically means this is all one case. So since Pasuk Zayin is talking about To'en Tanakana, Pasuk Vav must be talking about it as well. And if you're not convinced by this, well, the next braitot is going to say the opposite. Tanya Idach, Imi Matzeh Ganav B'Ganav Atzma Katuv Medaber. Imi Matzeh Ganav, the first Pasuk, Vav, is talking about a regular thief. Meaning, if I'm watching your item and someone steals it from the house where I'm watching it, that Ganav is found, they have to pay kefil to the original owner. Well, how do you know it's talking about the Ganav and not the To'en Tanakanav? To which they answer, the obvious answer, which is, right? At the beginning of Pasuk Zayin, it says, if you don't find the thief, and then you go take an oath, and then on anything that you fight about here and that I'm lying about, there it says, I pay kefil. So it shouldn't be saying in Pasuk Vav that you're paying kefil for that same thing, right? So since Pasuk Chet is talking about To'en Tanakanav, what else am I going to do with that first Pasuk? If not, Hamani Mekayem Imi Matzeh Ganav, B'Ganav Atzma Katuv Medaber. So we have this big debate, which we're going to get back to in about 2-3 minutes, of is Pasuk Vav talking about Ganav, and Pasuk Zayin Chet is talking about someone who claims that it was stolen, but really steals it themselves? Or is the entire section talking about To'en Tanakanav, in which case we're going to have to say, well, why are there two psukim that basically say you pay kefil if you are safeguarding someone's item and you lie and say it was stolen? But what they want to find out is, how do we know that it's all with an oath only that you have to pay the kefil? So they say here, okay, and then we'll get back to the other question, the bigger question. Everyone agrees, though, that Pasuk Vav and Zayin are talking about To'en Tanakanav. Nobody disagrees with that. It's all about Pasuk Vav that they're discussing. Now, my mashma, how do you get it from here? Amarava, im lo yimatzeh k'mosha amar ela shehu atzmo ganavo yishalem shnayim. How do they read im lo yimatzeh ganav? If we don't find a ganav, why don't we find a ganav, right? Again, you come claim your item. I say it was stolen, but we can't find the thief because there is no thief because I'm the one who stole it. Then I pay twice. But when do I pay double? At the end of Pasuk Chet. Now, what happens in between im lo yimatzeh ganav yishalem shnayim? Well, it says, Nikrav ba'al habayit el Elohim im lo shalach yado melecha re'ehu. We go to the court, presumably, to take an oath to say, I did not do anything wrong, right? I didn't do anything to your item. I didn't steal it. And then, of course, it turns out I was lying. Then I'll have to pay double. Now, Minala de B'Shvua, how do we know that those words, Nikrav ba'al habayit Elohim, the word, and I took an oath, is not in that pasuk? Tanya, well, that's from a different braitot. V'nikrav ba'al habayit el Elohim l'shvua. So the braitot says, this is coming to say, we went to the court for me to take an oath. So they say, how do we know it's to take an oath? Maybe it's just, we come to court and I say, I didn't steal it. And you say, well, where is it? Whatever. And then I basically say I didn't steal, and end of story. And then the witnesses come and say, you did steal. Maybe I'd have to pay kefil, even though I didn't take an oath. To which they answer, Ne'amar shlichut yad, right? Im lo shalach yado b'melecha re'ehu, lemata, v'ne'amar shlichut yad lemala. Okay, there's another pasuk. Lemata means a few psukim away. It says in a shomer sachal, if you look in Rashi, you can see shlichut yad lemata, it's further down in Rashi. V'nikrav ba'al habayit el Elohim im lo shalach. No, that's this one. Oh, sorry. Shlichut yad lemata, b'shomer sachar. I was looking at the wrong Rashi. Shvuat Hashem tieh ben shnehem im lo shalach yado. There it says you have to take an oath to say that you didn't do it. So since shlichut yad there has the word shvua next to it, and shlichut yad appears here, gzera shava, what's true for there is true for here, and that's how we know it's a shvua. So that was basically why we brought this. Okay, and we could have stopped our sugya here because we basically proved you're going to pay kefil in To'en Tanakanav case only in the event that you took an oath, and that's what we learned in the previous section, and that's what we were trying to prove here. But now the Gemara wants to understand this crazy debate of how to understand the simple reading of Pasuk Vav. Is it talking about a thief who steals from the house of the shomer, or is it talking about a shomer who lies? And then we have a lot of issues with both commentaries, really, and we're going to do a big ping pong back and forth. And we're not even going to finish it today, but I put on the chart the parts that are going to be on today's daf. Bishlama lamanda amal. Now we're going to do a set of bishlama. Bishlama means it makes sense according to the one who claims this. But the one who claims that, how is he going to explain this? And then we're going to go back and ping pong it back and forth. Because again, we're going to say, oh, he must learn that for that. And then we're going to say, well, then where does the other one learn that? And back and forth. So Bishlama Lamanda Amar Cha B'Ganav V'Cha B'To'en Tanakh Ganav. The second brayta is saying one pasuk vav is about a regular thief, and one is about someone who claims it was stolen. Hainu dechtive trei cry. Well, that's why one pasuk says there's kefil here, and one pasuk says there's kefil there, because they're two different cases. But the obvious question is, Lamanda Amar Travayu B'To'en Tanakh Ganav Trei cry lamali. What do you need two psukim to tell you there's kefil if they're both talking about me, who's the shomer, who claims that it was stolen and I was lying? Well, why do I need two psukim to tell me I have to pay kefil? It's the same thing. Well, Amrei Chad Mi'ute Ta'anat Avad. And this goes back to explain a different halacha that we learned out from that Mishnah, which is the second time it's mentioned is to tell you we're stressing that this is only if I claimed it was stolen, but not if I claimed it was lost. And that's the source for To'en Ta'anat Avad, at least according to this braytot. We're obviously going to have to say, according to the other braytot, where do they exclude this from? But the one who says that there is no extra one to darshan this, so where's he going to exclude Ta'anat Avad from? Mi ganav haganav. Well, if you notice, it says, Im lo yimatzeh haganav. Haganav is the thief. The thief is going to mean only someone who claimed theft, not someone who claimed it was lost. Okay, and the fact that it says haganav instead of ganav, right? Ganav is without the what do you call it? Definitive article, right? Without the word the. It's just thief. Thief could be thief, someone who claimed it was lost, but that thief comes to exclude one that was lost. So now we're going to ping pong back. According to the first brayta, they don't need ganav haganav to teach that because they learn it from the fact that there's two psukim talking about the same thing. If you use the second mention of it to say it excludes Ta'anat Avad, so ganav haganav my darish be. So what are they going to do with the fact that it uses a definitive article here? Amar lach, remember this, we'll go back again. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ato'en Tanakh Ganav bepikadon, mishalem tashlumei kefil. Tavach u'machal, mishalem tashlumei arba'a v'chamisha. He says that you're going to have to pay arba'a v'chamisha, not just kefil, also arba'a v'chamisha. Now, the pasuk only talked about kefil, but the fact that we basically call the shomer who steals it haganav, you are the thief, it means that all laws of theft apply to you. So if you stole a shor or a seh and you slaughtered it and you sold it, you're going to have to pay 4 or 5 times the amount. And as in this case, it wasn't that I stole it, but if you gave me a shor or set of watch, I claimed it was stolen. I went and I slaughtered them and sold them. I would have to pay the 4 or 5 payment because I am haganav. I am just like a ganav. Right? Now, obviously, we're going to now have to ping pong back to the other person. He uses ganav haganav to exclude someone who claims it was lost. So where is he going to learn this halacha from? That's exactly what I just said. If you hold one pasuk is for ganav, one pasuk is for the other, the to'en tanakh ganav, and then right one who claims it was stolen, and then the ganav haganav was used to exclude someone who claims it was lost. Where is he going to learn this from? He says, okay, he says it's a hekesh, and you can't argue with my hekesh, okay? You don't argue with hekeshim. What's a hekesh? A hekesh is a juxtaposition between two psukim, between a juxtaposition in a pasuk between two things, or one pasuk next to another. Now, there is no hekesh if you hold the psukim vav, zayin, and chet are all talking about the same topic. So we're done with the ping pong on that side because the person who says they're both to'en tanakh ganav, there is no hekesh. But if you hold the pasuk vav is talking about a regular thief, and pasuk zayin chet is talking about one who claims it was stolen, then you have a hekesh between the two. They're juxtaposed, which means that just like by regular theft, you're going to have 4 or 5 payment. Therefore, you're going to also have it by to'en tanakh ganav. Now we're going to end with our last question. If you have one pasuk is dealing with, and this is the real basic question, if pasuk vav is dealing with a ganav, and pasuk zayin chet is dealing with to'en tanakh ganav, then it makes sense why we mentioned kefil there and kefil there. They're two different cases. But obviously, we're going to have a problem, right? That's not the question. The question is, no, we already know. That was our first question. What the second one is for. The second one is for to'en tanakh ganav. I got confused for a minute. But now we're going to ask a different question, which is, So the one who says this all works out. We'll see in a minute what works out. If you view all these psukim is talking about to'en tana ganav, then you don't have a source for a regular ganav paying double. Now you do. You have pasuk, right? Remember the first few psukim we went to. You do have that, but that's only animals. Remember in pasuk gimel, if we find the stolen item by him from shor chamor ad sechayim, shnai mishalem. That's only about live animals. But what if it's a dead animal? What if it's not an animal? How do we know this kefel? Well, you don't learn it from pasuk vav because pasuk vav, according to the second braitot, we learned from pasuk vav. According to the first braitot, we have nowhere to learn it from. Now they suggest maybe you'll learn it from a kav chomer reasoning from the to'en tana ganav case, which it's if I had it in my house and I just kept it for myself and I didn't go out into your house, pull it out of your house and steal it, and I'm liable kefel. Of course, if I went into your house, pulled it out of your house and stole it, of course I'd be chayav kefel. That would be obvious. But what's the problem with learning it by kav chomer? This is a good review of things we learned before. You can only learn it's going to apply where that would apply. Now, in to'en tana ganav, what did we learn? Ma lahalan b'shvua. It's only if I took an oath that I didn't do it. Afkan b'shvua. Well, then that would mean if I stole your item, I came to your house, I stole your item. When am I chayav kefel? Only if I deny it in court under oath. Now, that's not true. I have to pay kefel no matter what. If witnesses come and say, saw me stealing your item or found it in my house, I would have to pay kefel no matter what. It doesn't matter whether I denied my claim under oath or didn't. I would, no matter what, have to pay kefel. So you can't learn it from a kav chomer. To which they answer, okay, well, then nafkalemi detana debechizkian. We're going to stop here because this starts a whole new section about, there's a whole braitot about where we're actually going to learn it from, this long braitot of the debechizkian. So today's daf, in short, we started with what's the source for kefel, that it applies across the board, and particularly we were bothered by the ofot. How do you know it includes ofot? We tried klal u'prat klal, in the end we took this other option of the kol l'ribuya. Then we had some other drashot there. Then we got into this Mishnah that distinguished between avad and ganav, to'en tana avad, to'en tana ganav, and we saw that it has to be under oath. Then we wanted to know what's the source for that. We brought these two contradictory braitot, but they all agree that there has to be a shvua before you have to take both. And then we had this ping pong back and forth about this fascinating discussion about how to understand a very simple pasuk in the Torah, pasuk vav, which can either be understood to be talking about regular theft, and then the main question we're left with is, well, then that teaches us kefel by theft, and that's all good. But if you think that psukim vav ad chet are all talking about to'en tana ganav, then where's your source that in any kind of geneva case, not just animals, you'd have to pay a double payment, and for that you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Wishing everybody a good day, and we'll meet up tomorrow for good news today.